everyone, and welcome to the Executive Webinar Series. Today's topic is 10 Insider Franchise Sales Strategies from Tropical Smoothie Cafe and franchise experts. Before we get started, we'd like to just give you some housekeeping items. Everyone will be muted because we have a large number of attendees on this. We will be recording this session, and the recording will be available to you afterwards. There will be a Q&A session at the end, and we invite you to submit your questions via chat. We'll get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. Any questions we don't get to on this call will be taken down, and we will answer them offline. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Keith Gerson.
And good afternoon or good morning, depending on where in the country you're calling from, even though I also think we have a couple of international callers today. Today we have another fantastic session, and it certainly is striking a nerve as we have one of our highest level of attendees and registrants. Want to remind everybody that today's session is being recorded, and for having participated, or even if you were unable to attend but were able to register, we've got a recorded copy coming out to you that will be available tomorrow. So thank you. Without further ado, we're going to jump right in here. So my name is Keith Gerson. I'm the President of Franchise Operations and the Chief Marketing Officer here at FranConnect. As you can see, I've been at this a long time, over 40 years in helping to drive franchisors and franchisees to record levels of growth and profitability. I'd like to tell you just briefly that FranConnect, which is the leading provider of franchise management systems with over 700 brands and 140,000 franchise locations, is committed to thought leadership. And I want to thank each of you for helping to make us number one. We were just named last month by the franchise readers of Entrepreneur Magazine as the number one online management and franchise system. We're all about growing unit expansion, increasing unit revenues, improving unit profitability, and reducing franchisee terminations. And today we're going to be focused on growing franchise sales. Our customers are growing 44% faster than the competitors, and I'm absolutely psyched and pleased to be able to have one of these incredibly successful customers and friends, Charles Watson, who's going to be helping to lead the session, along with Jennifer Campbell of Hot Dish Advertising, Mike Rosman, and again, Charles Watson, who's the interim CEO and Chief Development Officer for Tropical Smoothie Cafe. But let me let you identify their voices by giving them the opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves and their companies. Jen.
Hi, everyone. This is Jen Campbell, President of Hot Dish Advertising, and I'm excited to be here today to share some insight from our 19 years of working with franchise businesses, providing strategic marketing and advertising to generate leads for franchise brands, and probably just over 300 brands over those 19 years. So excited to be here, and thanks for having us, Keith.
Thank you, Jen. And next, I'd like to hear from Mike Rosman, CEO and co-founder of BoeFly. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Keith. Thanks for having me. Happy to be on. BoeFly works with franchisors to help them optimize their sales process. We focus in on a few things. We educate leads about their financeability. We help brands diligence new franchise applicants to make sure you're keeping standards up. And we also help franchisees secure efficient and competitive financing. We've helped franchisees from about 600 different systems throughout the year. So we'll share a couple of case studies today, and we're happy to be on, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you. And also the man of the hour, we have Charles Watson. Charles, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your considerable knowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I apologize to everyone on the call for my voice. I have the late summer cold, so I'm not this gruff sounding, I promise. Excited to be here. Tropical Smoothie Cafe. We've seen quite a bit of growth recently. We were founded in 1997 in Destin, Florida. We now make our home in Atlanta, Georgia. We have 700 open locations with a pipeline of 400 more to be developed. We play in the healthier, quick casual restaurant space. Our business mix is about 60% smoothie sales to 40% food sales. We have, over the years, finally reached our 2-to-1 investment ratio. It's about $325,000 to develop a tropical smoothie, with average sales in 2017 at $680,000. Our year-over-year growth is over 20% in terms of franchise sales, driving comp sales at the unit level and on our overall unit growth and system-wide sales. So a lot of hard work went into getting to those numbers, and hopefully I can share a couple secrets that can help all of you do the same thing.
And Charles, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you a question even before I let you get started. In your career, how many franchises have you sold or helped to develop, as well as how many just since you've been with Tropical Smoothie Cafe?
Sure. So I would say over my development career, probably about 1,250 franchises sold. My background is all hospitality, hotel and restaurant. Hotel's a little longer sales cycle, so not as many there. But over the past, I started with Tropical Smoothie in 2010, and from 2010 until 2018, sold about 1,000 franchises at Tropical Smoothie Cafe.
It's an amazing accomplishment, and as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm glad that I'm just moderating so I could keep my mouth shut for a change and learn from your expertise. Well, without further ado, let's get right into the presentations. I'd like to start by giving you a first glance at just one page out of the FranConnect Franchise Sales Index to give everybody just a bite of data that shows that in 2018, in our report based on 2017 sales, we see that the conversion rate of franchisors on average was 1.6%. That's a pretty considerable increase from where the 462 brands that are part of this data set were a year ago at 1.2%. So nice increase there. We can see once again that referrals tend to be the number one conversion from lead to a deal and our gold. Brokers, 3.8%. So for every 100 leads, they're closing just a little shy of 4 deals. Websites are generating 1.6% of the deals, or 1.6% closing effectiveness rate. Close rate for marketing in general of 1.27%. I mention this because Jen is going to be talking with us about some of the marketing programs and technologies that are being used to help drive that number north. Portals with a closing effectiveness rate of 0.7, again, once again, 1.6%. And let's now turn it over to our thought leaders to share what they're doing and maybe a few things about their own metrics and results.
Well, thank you, Keith. I think I'll start it off here and talk a little and get right into the tips because I think that's why everyone's here. One thing, Keith, I would tell you that I really appreciate is you're starting with the end up. So for everyone on the call, that last slide in regards to lead to sale ratio, that's what the end up of all of your tracking and franchise development should be. So I will tell you with Tropical Smoothie, our average is about 3%. So again, we've done very well. But look at the difference between 1.6 and 3. It doesn't seem like that much, but it adds up to a lot of franchises sold over time. The other thing I would start with is that franchise development is not easy. And I think that the slide previous to this really shows that. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and quite honestly, it takes dollars to be able to do it. If I were on CNBC right now, I would have to come out and tell you that I am a client of FranConnect. I am a client of Hot Dish, and I'm also a client of BoeFly. So I work with all these people to help me generate the type of success that we've had at Tropical Smoothie, and I'm just honored to be on a panel with these types of thought leaders. So there's my disclosure statement. So getting into tip 1, know your value proposition. That's a fancy way of saying know who you are and what you're selling. Really understanding, are you a small, medium, or large franchisor? What is it that you're trying to do? The first thing you have to ask yourself is, would I buy this franchise? Would my family and I, would we clear out our 401k or go get an SBA loan and buy my franchise? If you can't honestly answer that question as yes, then you have work to do on the business itself and what you're selling, right? So that ultimately gets to unit level economics. Can people make money with your brand? So that value proposition in my mind, I always go back to if franchisees are making money, everything will work out. It'll work out operationally and it'll work out development-wise if franchisees are making money. So that's the number one thing. If you don't have unit-level economics, you need to fix that first before you make a big push into franchise development, because you can spend a lot of money needlessly, because at the end of the day, most franchise buyers these days are much more astute than they were 20 years ago. They understand what that item 19 means for them and their pocketbook. My next portion would be, really, if you're going to go out and sell franchises, you're going to go out fishing. Once you get a fish on the line, do you know how to get it in the boat? So if you're going to go out and sell, do you understand and do you have resources in place to help those franchisees with real estate if you're a brand that requires real estate? Do you have design and construction resources if you're a brand that requires real estate and a build out? So do you have the system and process in place to bring that fish into the boat and have them be very successful coming into your franchise system? So all of that's super important. And then really understanding, if you're a smaller franchise, or let's say you have 5, 10, 20 franchisees, what is the profile of your successful franchisees? This could be the personality for sure. It could be passion. Hey, these people are really passionate about our brand. Could be work ethic. It could be, I need a person who has a lot of attention to detail, or I need a person who has just huge passion and a huge personality. Understand exactly what you're looking for, right? If a 25-year-old CPA is a great franchisee for you, great. If it's a terrible franchisee for you, great as well. You just need to know exactly what it is. And then the other thing I would say is really understand what needs you're trying to fulfill for that franchise buyer. And I will credit this to Bob Gappa, who's been around franchising for a long time. Understand what your franchise provides. Is it income? Is it equity? Is it a lifestyle? Is it the ability to build wealth? Understand what's really driving a franchise sale. Because as much as I like smoothies and flatbreads and wraps and bowls and all that kind of stuff, my franchise buyers, they like that, but they're really interested in what the business model can do for you. As an example for Tropical Smoothie, our early franchise buyers bought us when we were nowhere near a 2-to-1 investment ratio. We weren't even a 1-to-1 investment ratio at some points in 2008 and 2009. But our early stage buyers were so passionate that they just wanted to give it a go. Over the years, we have transitioned now to have the opportunity to fish in a bigger pond, which is ultimately being able to sell to people who are passionate about the brand, but also to business model buyers. As an example, I didn't ever go to the multi-unit franchise show until I had that 2-to-1 investment ratio where we were interesting to the business model buyer. So that's really where you want to get to. So that's the value proposition piece. And I'll move on, Keith, to the next slide. And tip number 2, know your audience. Right, so kind of as I alluded to, our early prospects were indeed our customers. They were people who loved our product, they loved our food, and they loved our smoothies. And they said, you know what? If I just bought one of these, I could save so much money from what I'm spending on my family at Tropical Smoothie Cafe. That can get you started, but it can't sustain you for long-term growth. It's back to really understanding the business model and making sure that you can get it to a point where it is a business investment. Again, understand your top performing franchise owners. What do they do well? And ultimately, what are they struggling with as well? Because those are the operational components of the business that you need to provide support to them for to help them be some more successful. At the end of the day, for any franchise, it's the development cost. What does it cost to build or to develop my franchise? And what are the sales, right? And then what is the profitability from that? So really understanding those unit level economics are very important, and trying to understand who your ideal candidate is. And you see here geography, demography, psychology, and motivations, right? So demographically, what is the profile of your target prospects? It's completely fine to ask those questions of who is successful and where have you had success. What are your financial requirements? The worst thing you can do in franchising is to bring on a franchisee who does not have the financial capability. If they are spent by the time they open their doors, they will not be successful. They will run out of capital, and I'm sure Mike Rosman at BoeFly would agree with me on that. Psychographics, what are the personal characteristics of your target? Motivations, again, income, wealth, equity, lifestyle. What's the drive behind the sale? And then geography. Think a lot about, depending on your size, think about the term concentric circles. If we're based in Atlanta and we're an early franchisor, we may only want to do Atlanta, Charlotte, and Birmingham. If we're based in LA, we may only want to do LA, San Francisco, and Seattle. Keep your development close so that you can support it operationally. So I'll turn it over now to Jen.
Yeah, and I want to just add to that in terms of the audience targeting. I think one of the things that we often see is that people forget that their brand fans might be a great prospect for the franchise development opportunity. And so it's one of the least expensive ways that you can market your brand. And so I encourage you to think about what percentage of your leads may potentially be coming from that particular audience, as well as what percentage of your franchisees might be expanding. And then from there, you know, to hit your goals, how many new people do you need to go find? And that's that ideal candidate that Charles just spoke to, that you need to drill down into. And I think a lot of brands tend to just speak to financially what the requirements are and simply look at that. And when they're not completely drilled into other reasons like the psychographics and the motivations alignment, then sometimes it falls flat because they're too narrow in their thinking, and you need to kind of really hone in on your ideal audience. So yeah, so flipping to the next slide, that's a good transition to our tip number 3, which is developing your marketing approach for your generating leads for your franchise. And I guess kind of going back to your brand fans potentially being qualified to own your franchise opportunity, first look at determining, are there ways that I can message within my 4 walls? Meaning, in the case of Tropical Smoothie, we have messaging on the cups, for example, that say that it's a franchise opportunity, and we have our URL for the franchise. And also we created a sign where we hung it up in each of the cafes that indicates why you might want to own one, so that when they're in the cafes, they can actually see and the messaging that there is a franchise opportunity with Tropical Smoothie as an example. And then from there, it's important to look at all the different paid media that you can certainly focus on. I'm sure you've all seen that there's so many different ways that you can market your franchise today. And that can be everything from print publications that might be industry related, or simply business journals and other types of marketing that you can do where they're actually spending their time consuming just business data on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, there's also kind of top of the funnel ideas of really looking at radio, where radio could be a way that, you know, for Tropical Smoothie, once they became a national brand and got as large, you know, from coast to coast, we started looking at radio and XM radio as a way to really broaden our reach to audiences that may not even have heard of the brand. And then I think some very typical other social and digital has become almost the norm in franchise development today. There's 2 different ways that we look at that. One being is that we talked about our audience targeting previously. Well, once you've defined who that audience is, you can actually drill down and send your ads so they appear in what, let's say, in the Facebook feed, like you see the ad here, or potentially next to content that somebody might be reading as they're online. We would target them specifically based off of their profile that you create once you've defined your audience. And then what were the ideal, I guess, path would be that we would send people to the website. And the other tactic that's very common and is actually a high converter is remarketing. So if you haven't been doing remarketing yet off of your website, I would highly encourage that. Basically what it is that once somebody goes to your site and does not convert as a lead, you can market to them as they are out on the internet exploring, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or on other sites. For example, if somebody left your site and went to read the news on CNN, your ad might appear there because it's following the person as they have left your website. So it's a great way to convert. And then I think, you know, this is something that's super important, that especially as an emerging brand, referrals is a way for you to grow organically initially as well. But you probably, as Charles can tell you, you have to put it in your FDD, where you may have referral fees that you pay your franchisees or vendors if they refer potential candidates to you. So that's why we consider it kind of a paid tactic. And email marketing. There's lots of different ways to execute that. One might be to market to your dormant leads. If you've had a number of leads that have come in over time in markets that are important to you for growth, but they died off for, they might have been qualified, but perhaps the timing wasn't right, reach back out to them with email marketing from your CRM so that they are aware that maybe there's some new developments in the brand. Or you can purchase email lists or purchase them through publishers, where the publishers send those out directly to their audience, where you can have access to the list, but you can at least reach their audience. And then, of course, there's lots of ways to get earned media with public relations, having a great public relations firm that can help you at least be a thought leader in sharing content out on your behalf, or making sure you're out there getting the awards that you can publicize then on your website. And Charles, maybe you want to speak to just the broker idea, that that's just another way that people can generate leads for their system.
Yep, absolutely. Brokers can be very effective. There's different levels of brokers and different costs associated with them. I would tell you that they typically are high cost because they're primarily folks that have been in franchise development before but are working on their own. And it's certainly something to test the waters with. We have used brokers for many years, but in the past 3 to 4 years, we kind of have moved beyond where we're able to generate enough leads where we don't have to give up part of that franchise sale dollar to brokers. But they absolutely are a great resource for leads and for closing deals, as you can see from Keith's slide at the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah, and also just knowing that all of these things come into play together. There's not any one item on here that we would say is going to be more effective than another necessarily. The idea is that you want people to see you all over, wherever they are spending their time in their day, and it's usually the cumulative effect that generates the idea that it's actually time to consider the brand and to reach out to you. So make sure that you don't put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to marketing. And one other idea too that has kind of surfaced as a opportunity for some brands has been geofencing. And so if you haven't heard of that before, it is with your digital marketing, where you have the ability to simply say, I want my ad to appear in a radius of an event or of a location. So for example, if your brand fans are, as we mentioned earlier, a prospect, you could geofence around your location messaging so that when they're sitting in a Tropical Smoothie Cafe or your location, that they see your ad appear about franchise development in their news feed or otherwise. So just another tip to consider if you want to be hyper targeted with your marketing. And on the next slide, we did want to just also mention that part of the marketing plan needs to also include a very highly developed and well executed website, because the last thing you want to do is spend a lot of money to generate leads, which are all going to go to your website. People are spending a lot of time online doing their own due diligence, but we want to get them to a website that really truly spells out the opportunity and gives them the information that they need to honestly self-select in if it seems like the right opportunity, if I have the financial requirements, I'm culturally aligned, all of the things that we talked about previously, that I would consider submitting my information to be contacted. But at the same time, a good website will also help people self-select out. So in the case of a Tropical Smoothie Cafe, there's a lot of young people that are teenagers going to a cafe day to day, and they may think it's super cool and they want to learn more about the franchise opportunity, but they can't afford it. So we want them to understand that they would have to have the financial backing at some point to be able to own one, and they wouldn't submit a lead, for example. But we really recommend in that website having multiple calls to action so that people can know to take action, to call and to contact you. And some of them might be a soft call to action, like to get an online brochure to learn more, which simply is the exact same lead that you would receive if somebody filled out the Learn More button or Inquire Now button on your website. The key is to continue to share out what it takes financially in that process. And so we typically try to have sites converting at 3% or more, knowing that there's some that we can convert higher depending on how targeted the campaign is. All right, so next let's talk about the sales process, and Charles can walk you through that.
I will jump in here because if I am anything, I am a process nerd. So my view of the world is that franchise development in this day and age is not about selling. I'm not trying to sell you a used car and I don't have a shiny gold necklace around my neck. It is about a consultative approach. So I want franchise development folks to be process to have a ton of process to take somebody through and have a ton of brand knowledge. The franchise development folks are the people on the front lines, and they need to be able to speak intelligently about every aspect of the franchise that they're selling. So whatever you need to do to bring those franchise development people along to have a full view of the business, that's what you need to do. Taking a prospect through a sales process, I think, is great for the obvious reason. Many of you have heard it on the phone. If they can't follow the sales process and they're bucking the sales process, they're certainly not going to run your franchise according to the operations manual. Franchising is all about process. So going through a sales process and seeing if that prospect is willing to let you lead them is a great indicator of how successful they'll be in your franchise sales process. I really started years ago and set it up based on the paperwork that I needed to get in. I used those as the buoys, so to speak, in the sales process. Well, the first thing I need to do is get an application, right? So the application becomes a step in the process. Then I need an FDD receipt. These are what I would call hoops in the sales process. So every one of those hoops, which is basically an action that the franchise prospect needs to take or that they need to deliver back to you, is a hoop. And the more hoops that they get through, the closer you are to closing that deal. What we need to do on the development side is to intersperse our contacts within those hoops, right? So those are calls, those are drip emails, staying in touch with them and providing more information to the prospect so that they become more and more engaged throughout every step of the process and are more and more likely to jump through that hoop and to send you the FDD receipt or to do the business plan, whatever it may be. What I've found over the years is there's best practice. About 6 to 8 steps is the sweet spot for the length of the sales process. It doesn't need to be too short and doesn't need to be too long. And we are very defined in running our sales process, and it has provided great results for us, and it has allowed us to really increase our close ratio. One of the big pieces of that sales process is really understanding the capital requirements. So I always talk on these things about the 4 things that our development people look for on call 1 or call 2. Timing, location, capital, and experience. One of the big things that allows you to be more efficient is an understanding of the financial situation that prospect is in. And I can't think of anybody better to talk about how understanding that earlier in the sales process is than Mike Rosman. So I'll turn it over to him to talk us through how BoeFly works to help franchisors close more deals with a better understanding of the financial position of the prospect.
Thanks for that, Charles. Charles brought up, I thought, a really strong point around a couple aspects. One is about this idea of process, right? So he described himself as a process nerd. It's probably one of the reasons why I enjoy spending time with him, because I fall in that same camp. It's about process, and quite honestly, that's what franchising should be all about, right? Is giving folks a process to be successful. He also talked about understanding the candidates, and so the slide I have up right now is right from the Tropical Smoothie Cafe page. And when Charles articulated that he's looking for specific demographic information, specific candidate types, they're right up front. They want to be really clear that I'm looking for 125,000 liquid assets and a minimum net worth of 350. Franchising fundamentally is a financing approach. If Tropical Smoothie wanted to go raise money from the capital markets to go open stores, they could do that. They've chosen to, for a couple different reasons, not exclusively financing, but they've chosen to go ahead and rely on partners that are going to use their own capital to drive that growth. So, what I want to talk about is that financial qualification and diligence. Since financing is such an important hoop, we've been paying attention to brands that are using that hoop to drive better outcomes in their workflow. I think Charles and Tropical Smoothie right up front on this slide shows they're prominently displaying their net worth requirements. I think gone are the days of franchise salespeople saying, well, I don't want to scare a guy away yet by telling them they need $350,000 of net worth. And I think we would hear Charles scream back, I want to scare a guy away if they don't have the capital to succeed. Now, they may go off and find a partner that can help them succeed, but his sales team is too busy about the other processes to work with folks that really aren't capable of being successful. So as we look at the next slide, what we're looking at is thinking about how to qualify people and using that financial aspect. So one of the things that we found useful is from brands leveraging is this idea of helping the applicant or the franchise lead qualify themselves and educate themselves about their financeability. So what we've seen, and here's an example from the Checkers Rally public-facing franchise site, they've got a link on there to allow the applicant to get educated about their financeability. This does a couple things. One, it allows the franchise applicant to understand what they're looking at from a financing path. It also empowers the brand to know that the franchisee is thinking about financing, and that may become an important aspect of their development process. In this case, Checkers is providing the applicant a soft credit score, and that information is provided at no cost to the franchise lead, and they're giving that soft credit score information to make sure the franchisee understands where they're sitting. It's convenient that this information drops right into their CRM, FranConnect. But the idea here is the more education you can give to a lead, the better the workflow is going to go. On the next slide, we've actually done an interesting analysis with the brand BrightStar Cares. They're in the home healthcare business. I suspect a lot of you know them. We actually took a look at leads that went through their sales process. We looked at about 5,000 leads, and I have to thank Keith and his team for sharing data to do this analysis through FranConnect. But what we compared was those leads that get education, which we label B-Qual, that's how BoeFly provides education. Those leads on the right side that got education versus leads that went through the sales process without getting self-education. And we normalized the outcome down to one franchisee. And what we saw is, perhaps not surprising, those leads that go through the sales process and seek education and are more engaged, they convert 9 times better than leads that don't go through that sales process or through that educational process. And it stands to reason, if someone's raising their hand to get educated, they're more engaged and more serious, and the more information you can give to the candidate, the better the outcome is going to be. On the next slide, I want to raise this point around diligence, and we use that word here. Lenders use that word diligence a lot. What we mean by it is making sure the brand understands the actual wherewithal of their applicant. What is their liquid assets? What is their net worth? What does their criminal background path look like? And what does their credit look like? So here's an example of a report that we have that highlights liquidity, net worth, the criminal background report, and credit. Now, I think almost all leading brands are doing a criminal background check and a credit pull. I think the majority are also looking at assets, liquidity, and net worth. If you go to the next slide, what we've done is we've taken a look at a case study where a brand, by actually incorporating a more thorough process of that diligence, of actually pulling the bank statements to making sure, to actually verifying the liquidity and net worth, they were able to, in this case, Meineke Maaco, as part of the Driven Brands family, they were able to shorten their sales process between FDD and franchise approval. They cut it in half. And I think one of the drivers is, one, by getting that information and making it a clear required step, the franchisee is put on notice that this is a brand that doesn't just, as Charles said, it doesn't just sell franchises. They're in the business of awarding franchises, and they want to make sure their partner is in a position to succeed. And by bringing that information up front in the sales workflow, what we're seeing is it's shrinking the timeline, which is going to become very important to faster store openings and increase. In our case, we're actually layering in a financial pre-qualification from a lender. Once we have our hands on liquidity, net worth, credit, background check information, we can actually bring in financing right up front at the moment they're signing their franchise agreement, which will then accelerate the various workflows that we're thinking about. So, with that, I want to pass it back to Charles as we pivot back towards nurturing leads.
So thanks so much, Mike, and Jen will help me with this one as well as we move on to our next tip, number 6, nurturing your leads to improve your close ratio. So I had alluded to it earlier, and this is something that with FranConnect we do, is we have a pretty robust drip email campaign. And so a lot of technology allows you now to utilize photography, utilize videos, etc. You're trying to tell a story, and you're trying to tell a story and keep people engaged. too much in this process is too much, right? So you can see a little bit on the slide of kind of the professional look and feel of some of our emails, right? That comes across well. Remember, a lot of the franchises that you're competing against, their salespeople are probably just sending an email from their Outlook account, right? And so receiving an email like you see on the screen, either on your phone or on your desktop, is going to show that you're a little bit higher level, or you've got a little bit more skin in the game and a little bit more investment in helping them understand what your franchise is all about. We utilize a lot of franchisee testimonials. So again, understanding who your brand champion franchisees are, you've got to get them on board. Because at the end of the day, guys, franchise buyers, franchise prospects, they don't want to talk to us. They have to talk to us to go through the hoops and the process. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting them through the process where they can talk to franchisees, because that's where the rubber meets the road and they make a buying decision. What we also have is really, again, back to that process, having clear calls to action. So I would tell you on our early drip emails, the call to action is fill out an application, right? That is the ultimate thing that we're trying to do to get the process going. That's the first step to, okay, I filled out a form on a website. Now I'm actually really interested. I'm giving you some personal information about me. And I know that Mike at BoeFly, I mean, this is a point that you can already go ahead and do kind of some financial qualifications. So this is typically where that would come in. As our drip emails continue, we have different triggers as we trigger from an application is now received. The next trigger would be, all right, I've got to get an FDB receipt, et cetera. So very much that processed approach that we've been talking about, but with a lot of bells and whistles, videos, testimonials, photography, et cetera, that really keeps the prospect engaged. Hold some of that information back about your franchise. Don't give it all up at once. String it out a little bit to keep them engaged. So to kind of go to continue on that with tip 6 on the next slide, the qualification piece. Again, I think Mike spoke brilliantly about it. Another way that you can do it is really making sure you have an online application. Make it as easy as possible with the technology we have today to fill that information out online, on your phone, et cetera. Over 50% of our leads are coming from iPads and cell phones, and you guys are probably seeing that as well. So make sure that your website and everything is absolutely mobile enabled. Start there first. worry about how your website looks on mobile even before desktop, because that's where a majority of the leads are coming from, and making it very easy for prospects to give you the phone number, the email, et cetera, so that you can start a conversation with them is really, really important. On the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Jen. She works with Tropical Smoothie quite a bit on really understanding and helping me do sales guy math and understanding what the KPIs are that I need to be tracking.
All right, yeah, so I think talking about the media that we talked about before, it's important to understand that there are different KPIs for the different types of paid media that you're running, because I think sometimes brands think that everything should generate a lead, and if it doesn't generate a lead, then I'm going to just toss it out the window because it's not part of the mix that I need to hit my goals. But the reality is that a lot of the things at the top of the funnel that you see here that are broad reaching, like radio and print, direct mail, some of the search terms, that's really top of the funnel, where we're just basically trying to get people to understand that your opportunity exists. And simply what's going to happen there is we're hoping to drive traffic to the site so that they become aware of you for the first time. So we would measure that more on traffic to the site. And then once they become aware of your brand, then the idea would be is how do I stay in front of them? And that's where some of that remarketing that we talked about previously comes into play, where we're going to drive traffic to the site, but also we want to see how much time they're spending on the site. Are they spending more time actually doing due diligence about your brand and getting the information that they need? And then as you move down the funnel, when we start to engage with them, that's where we introduce other tactics that are your non-brand paid search, but your paid search will be ultimately the one that does a lot of the conversion because they have done due diligence and now they want to go back and find you, or it might be direct. But that's where you start to measure on those tactics the cost per lead. And then cumulatively, you want to look at your cost per lead overall to see which tactics are helping to drive the most efficiency for you. And then let's talk about KPIs relative to the sales process, because that's just as important on the next slide. And
yeah, I'll jump in here. Yeah, I'll jump in here. I time everything. So again, as you're hearing from me, for those of you who get on a lot of these webinars, there's the best practices are the best practices, right? And so they move slowly. So it's a lot of the same stuff that you're hearing over and over. But again, if you're going to set up process, then the ability to drive that process and to then ultimately get to efficiency, excuse me, is about really understanding time. Time kills all deals. We all know that, right? So I'm also very nerdy on understanding the length of time for things like inquiry to application, inquiry to close, et cetera. You want to time everything. If you time everything, then you can understand where the bottlenecks are. FranConnect is very good at this. It helps us to really understand from one of those triggers, the trigger being get an application, trigger being FDD received, et cetera. What is the time in between each of one of those things? And so in my head, after doing this for many years, when I go and look and talk to my sales team and they give me some of those metrics, I know what it means. When I get to the end of the quarter and they tell me that I have 17 franchise agreements sent, I know how to discount that and say, okay, by the end of the quarter, we should close this amount. So by doing that over time, it gives you a lot more visibility. And from a budgeting process, which any of you who are managing development teams, what does your CEO want to know? How many are we going to close this month? How many are we going to close this quarter, et cetera? You'll be able to give much better answers to those questions that are data driven. So the things I really like to look at, and again, it can be done in FranConnect. I'll be honest with you, I still use a spreadsheet called a deals working sheet with my sales team. It's old school, and I look at how many applications are in, how many franchise agreements are set, how many FDD receipts are in. So I'm looking at three big areas of the sales process. And again, I have a percentage ratio of all those applications that are in. I should close about 40% of those, right? And when I'm looking at franchise agreements sent, I would tell you at Tropical Smoothie, once we send a franchise agreement, we're closing at about 85%. So I can handicap that. So it's very important to really understand that length of time. And on the next slide, tracking your results, I think Jen would be a great person to talk about this.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of ways that you can really have the data that Charles and his team needs to, like you will need to actually set your, expectations, but also know how you're tracking in terms of your budget. And so the first thing I would recommend is that if you have any print publications or anything where you are out advertising the brand that isn't digital, although you can have tracking phone numbers on digital as well, but it's a low cost to have 800 number that you can assign to every single tactic, so that you know that if you're in 3 publications, each publication has its own 800 number, so that you can match back and say exactly how many leads you received from that ad in that publication. And then on the online side of it, there is technology now where you have the ability to do URL tracking. So for example, if somebody clicked on a Tropical Smoothie paid search ad, and then once they clicked on the ad, they would go to the website, do their due diligence, and then decide to submit the form. Once that lead is sent to FranConnect, then there is actually a hidden field that also sends information that says exactly which ad it came from. So if it was a certain type of message that we were using, it would indicate the message that we had used, as well as the fact that it came from paid search. So then as marketers, we're able to understand which tactics we're doing actually are performing. And then it also gives us knowledge in terms of what message is performing the best, so that we can use that information to further optimize the campaign. And so what we look at is what is the cost per inquiry overall from each of the tactics that we're running. But then once they become a lead, so more than just an inquiry, the ones that you've reached, what is it costing us to get that lead specifically that's a qualified lead, because we want to know what percentage are qualified versus not, because we also want to feed the tactics that are producing the most qualified leads. And then ultimately, we're driving towards a cost per sale. And I think that should be everyone's goal, that you can't simply judge the cost per lead on certain tactics overall, because certain tactics, as I mentioned earlier, perform different functions in the marketing process for you, that if you hit your ideal cost per sale overall, then as those things work in tandem, we drive towards that number. So we track towards that to see what's producing the lowest cost per sale overall. And it's also important within the CRM with FranConnect to be noting lead status changes. So for example, you might have a lot of leads coming in from certain lead sources or across the board, but they're initially qualified financially and they align with the brand, but perhaps there are reasons why, personal reasons why they may not move forward. You want to know that that lead was considered qualified, and even though it fell out, it should be a way for you to understand the quality of that channel too. So even though they may not eventually close. So make sure you take good notes within FranConnect to be able to identify that at a later date. And then on the next slide, we want to talk about testing. I do think that, that's another piece where you can't just set your campaign and just let it run. You really need to understand that there are a number of ways to test to make sure your campaign's efficient as well as messaging. But overall, I would say that you should just think about when you're budgeting for your marketing dollars, that you should dedicate about 80% of your budget to really the proven tactics that are the lead generators that are driving those overall conversions for you. But then remember that there's about 20% of your budget that you should just be okay with testing, and some of it's going to work and some of it's not. But you'll never be forward thinking and ahead of the curve if you aren't testing new ideas to make sure that you can find other opportunities out there. And with the testing, there's lots of ways for you to track that. One of the free tools that are out there, if you're not aware, is Google Analytics, which you should have set up on your website. And that really is done, you can use that to understand once people get to the website, how many pages are they visiting? What is your conversion rate on the website? And really just understanding the user flow so that you can know if the website's working as hard as you can. And then there's a technology out there now, a number of companies that have heat map technology that basically, as you can see here, what it does is it shows you where people are spending the most time on a page. And if they're clicking the most on certain parts of your website, then it shows you where they click and then which page they go to next. And in some cases, it can actually record as people are actually interacting and then filling out a form, and you see exactly what they do. And maybe if there's places that they get hung up, you can make some changes on your site to make it more effective. And then the other one on a search engine optimization side that allows you to understand what keywords are most important to your brand is SEO Moz, and that's a pretty inexpensive tool as well. And it also gives you information on your competitors and keywords relative to them. So that is a great tool as well. And so last, I think tip number 10, we're going to jump about how to set your annual budget. So Charles, you want to speak to how you do that every year?
Absolutely. So I'll wrap this up quickly. Everything that that we've talked about ultimately comes down to investment decisions. It's an investment decision in how fast you want to grow your franchise system, right? So at the end of the day, for a development person or a VP or a CDO, et cetera, it's all about how do I go to my CEO? How do I go to my board? And I want dollars. At the end of the day, franchise development takes dollars. It's a plant that needs water and sunlight, right? So if you want dollars, you need data at the end of the day. So having the data will get you the dollars. So we talked through a lot of those things. And at the end of the day, the easiest back of the napkin is what is my average cost per sale? If my franchise fee is $20,000 and it's costing me about $11,000 in marketing and media spend to get that sale, it's very easy to multiply the cost per sale times the number of deals that you want to come up with a very rough budget. I've been doing this for years, and I got to tell you, the back of the napkin is just about right on. It really is. It is produced. The investment produces the sales. All the granular stuff, exactly where those dollars are going, et cetera, is all super important. But as you guys go into budgeting this year, this is the thing that you need, because the answer that you're going to have to provide is why. Why do you want $300,000? What am I going to get for it, et cetera? So having that data behind it to say, if you give me $300,000, $400,000, or even $100,000 or $50,000, what can I expect is my ROI? What's my return? So really understanding the data and getting to ultimately that cost per sale number will give your board, your CEO, your management a real idea of what they can expect in terms of return on investment on their franchise investment dollars. And ultimately, that's where that's what we're all looking to do, is how much does it cost to sell X amount of franchises. So I think at this point I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Keith, and it might be Q&A time.
And right you are. First of all, I'm going to unmute the phones just for 5 seconds here, because I just have a feeling I'm going to get a reaction from the audience. Let's see here. Oh, there you go. Well done, guys. And for those counting at home, we went through 10 tips. We are going to open it up to Q&A. And we have some questions coming in. First one I want to answer for everybody, because this is the question I'm getting the most, is as to whether or not you all can expect the full recording and the video of this session. And the answer is yes, you will have it. We want to thank you so much for attending, and I want to encourage you now to submit your questions on the dashboard, as Sherry Stanton shared with you earlier. So let's go to some questions right off the bat here. So, Charles, in your franchise system, what is the goal? What is the likely objective that you will achieve this year in terms of total sales, and how many salespeople do you have on your staff to accomplish that?
Sure, absolutely. So our goal this year is 200 franchise sales. We are currently at 150. We're currently at 150 for 2018, and so I think we'll reach that goal. Feel good about fourth quarter for us. As far as my team, to answer that question, I would tell you that it really is back to my process nerd thing. I've got salespeople that I prefer to take people who are a little bit more green and really train them and indoctrinate them in this system and in brand knowledge. And so what it's allowed us to do is be pretty darn efficient. These 200 deals will get done 100 each by 2 salespeople. And I would say that is probably not typical, but we're extremely efficient. I would tell you that the wings on the plane are shaking a lot, and I'm burning my salespeople out. So we've actually added a third salesperson about 2 months ago. So we'll have a total of 3 salespeople going forward in 2019, and we'll probably keep the goal about the same at 200. We think that that's comfortable for us, with each salesperson averaging about 75 to 80 deals.
Wow. 75 deals, and yours is a brick and mortar location. And that usually means that you're looking at a higher quality lead, at least getting back to Mike's discussion. Somebody who is more liquid. What are your liquid requirements, and can you share a little bit about what you're experiencing in terms of your pre-qualification and
Sure.
What you're experiencing with Mike's technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically we require $125,000 in liquid capital. Our investment, as I said, was $325 to $350, right? And so I would tell you that we're a heavy user of the SBA lending program. So a lot of our franchisees do use that. As Mike would probably tell you, we could probably get away with $100,000. You can probably get the loan that you need to open a Tropical Smoothie with just $100,000 in liquid. We up it a little bit just because through the years and through experience, having more is always better. You can always keep some of it in your pocket, but it makes you more attractive as a borrower to have more liquid cash available. And so the other thing I would say also is that as you get momentum and as you begin to sell more franchises and develop more, here's the beauty of it. Your cost per sale goes down because 50% of the franchises that we sell are to existing franchisees. So the cost per sale on that is much lower. 7 years ago, that was not the case. It was much more new franchise sales. But as you get momentum and you start going, what you should do is drive down that cost per sale as your existing franchisees say, I want more, I want more. So the thing I'm probably most proud of for Tropical Smoothie, because I think it answers how we're doing operationally, how we're doing profitability-wise, is the appetite of our existing franchisees to buy and develop more Tropical Smoothie cafes. So please note, when you put these best practices in place over 2, 3, 4 years, you start to get efficiency, and the dollars that you have to spend actually come down to achieve your sales goals.
Terrific. So 75 per one sales candidate, but of those, how many would you say are new entrants to your system, or are you selling 3 packs, 5 packs, 10 packs?
So we absolutely are selling package deals. I would tell you that about 50%. So I would say probably 100 of our franchise sales will be existing franchisees and 100 will be new franchisees. So we feel like that's a really good mix of people that are already in the family growing as well as new blood and people coming in. So we love that mix of new and existing. I would tell you that our average deal size is this year is a 3-pack. Right, so we've done plenty of singles. We've done a couple 5s and 7s and 10s, but as you average it out, our average sale size is 3. And our average cost per franchise sale, we are running right at about $13,000 a sale, and our franchise fee is $30,000 for the first and $20,000 for anything in addition.
Terrific. Thanks so much. I'm going to flip over to Jen. We had 2 questions for you, Jen. One of them is, would you please explain again what Moz is?
Sure. Yep. So it's called SEO Moz, and so that term is SEO being search engine optimization, and that tool allows you to connect and understand what keywords are most important to you in terms of trying to optimize your website for organic traffic. So think of it when somebody does an organic search, not a paid ad that they're clicking on. And then it also allows you to put your competitors in there, so then you're able to see what would be important keywords for your competitors as well, so that you can create a strategy for your SEO for your opportunity.
Terrific. And then
the other. Hey Keith, Keith, if you don't mind, could I clarify one point with you?
Sure.
The $13,000 cost per sale, that is a cost per sale for new franchisees only. If I combine my existing franchisees and my new franchisees for all 200, my cost per sale is about $6,000. We break it into new franchisees and existing franchisees, so you can see we're well below industry average in terms of cost per sale. But again, that's driven by the fact that we have a lot of existing franchisee sales. So I just want to clarify that for people, because if it was me on the line, I'd say, so he's going to do 200 deals at times 13,000. That is not the budget we're working with, I assure you.
I got you. And as long as we got you in the spotlight again, we had a question as to whether or not the $11,000 is an example of the average cost per sale based on a minimum franchise investment deal. For example, an investment requirement for $250,000 to $500,000 per franchise.
I think that's pretty accurate. Every year that the Franchise Leadership and Development Conference in Atlanta, which I think is next week or in the next 2 weeks, those stats come out from VPs of development and CDOs, et cetera, that all put out their data to get that average. But Jen, it usually ranges from anywhere from 10 to 14,000. So I think 11,000 is a good number to use.
Terrific. And then we had one of our attendees today asking Jen if you could speak to examples of this heat map technology, or examples of providers.
Sure. The one that we currently use is called Hotjar, and so that's one of many. And I'm sure my digital team knows about 5 other providers, but that one seems to be the most effective that we've used. So that's Hotjar is the name of the company.
Terrific.
Crazy Egg. I'm sorry. The other one would be Crazy Egg that I've heard of.
Okay, so Hotjar and Crazy Egg.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. Let's talk about, since you mentioned that about 20% of the budget should go over to R&D. I'm wondering if any one of our panelists today can speak to some of the exciting new non-traditional approaches that you're discovering that may have merit for others that are listening, that you're willing to share.
Well, I can jump in first. This is Jen. I think one of the things that we have been doing that I think makes a lot of sense is really trying to look at the markets that you're trying to grow in, and making sure that you have a really defined marketing process for helping to grow those out, because certainly once you have a location open in one market, you want to build it out as quickly as possible, because obviously there's strengths in numbers in those markets. And so we've been doing a lot, especially with Tropical Smoothie, where Meet the CEO events, where you go into a market, They host an event at the cafe where they actually have the CEO come speak to why the brand is growing. A franchisee is there and talks about why they chose to franchise with the brand. And it gives them a tour of the location. And also we use that as kind of a marketing hook to get people to inquire, as well as nurturing old, like dormant leads within the FranConnect system. And so I think, while maybe not innovative, I would say it's something that, given the length of time in market for the brand, it has been effective, and not, I guess, everyone's doing that. So that's one tip I would say.
And a good one it is. Well, in the interest of time, we are at the top of the hour. A couple of things I want to say to those of you that have questions that have gone unanswered. We will get you answers through our panelists. Or through myself, depending on where they're generated. I would like to let you know, though, that you're going to want to come to FranConnect in Washington, D.C. on November 5th through 7th. This is really our best thought leadership program that we have. We'll have tracks including Charles Watson, who will be speaking at our franchise sales track. We've got a CEO growth circle, operations, marketing and engagement. It's going to be a terrific event in Washington, D.C. Here's an email address right here. Please click in to get $100 off of your registration, and we definitely hope to see you there. For those that are also looking to get in touch with me or any of our speakers, I'm going to leave this up here for a minute for you to screen capture, and also my information to follow, which I'll have up there after we leave the meeting. So much thanks and appreciation to all the hard work and prep that went into this, and not just the prep for this, but obviously a lifetime of careers here that basically represented such amazing thought leadership. Jen, Michael, and Charles, on behalf of myself and our audience, thank you so much for attending. We look forward to getting you information as we on our next webinar. We do these every single month, and if you have ideas, please send me your ideas or any questions, or if you'd like to engage with our staff, just send me an email or give a telephone call to this number. Thanks again, everybody. It's been a great session. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day and week.